It didn't work out as a classroom. That was discovered very quickly. And very quickly also it moved to being a gallery and is now the Dal Schindell Gallery. And over many years now, that space has hosted remarkable exhibitions, including the one that we are really privileged and delighted to host right now. So there's a lot of backstory in the history. And in more recent years, we have really taken much more of an active interest in journeying ourselves as Regent College with our friends from the Musqueam whose territory this is, and learning and understanding their experience and being good neighbors to our Musqueam brothers and sisters in the church and to our Musqueam neighbors overall in this territory. And we're on a learning journey as a part of that, and that's been really interesting and important for us and has a number of different aspects and facets to it in the classroom and outside. And particularly with this exhibit, we have an opportunity, I think, for us as Regent College to learn and to join in a journey. And we'll hear more about that journey tonight. So personally and on behalf of the college, I'm really delighted that we have this opportunity with this remarkable exhibit to explore and to learn. It's really valuable for us. So what I want to do is simply hand over in just a minute to Jonathan Anderson, but just to say that this exhibit has been opened last week in a lovely ceremony upstairs that some of you attended. And at that time, Deborah Sparrow from the Musqueam was with us and very beautifully presented a marvelous blanket to Patricia. It was really quite beautiful as her own welcome and literally embrace to be in this space and to have this exhibit. Turns out that those two, Deborah and Patricia, have met before, I think on a basketball court. So they have a long history together, and that was a really special moment. But to be welcomed by Deborah on behalf of the Musqueam people to this exhibit and to this land was very special, and also her very special welcome to Patricia to bring her gifts to us so that we could learn with her and from her. So tonight we have a panel discussion. I'm going to hand over now with that recognition and appreciation to Dr. Jonathan Anderson, who is from the Regent faculty, serves as the Peterson Chair in Theology and the Arts. He's just joined us this year, and we're delighted that Jonathan is here, himself a visual artist and theologian of the arts. And so he'll introduce our panelists and tell about the format that we're using for tonight. So I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Well, good evening and welcome. Just to add my welcome to that, we're delighted to have you here, and I think this will be a really wonderful event. It's been such a pleasure talking to each of these people in constructing this show, and so I'm really looking forward to extending that tonight. And I want to briefly introduce all of them so you know who you're hearing from. Starting at the end, Dr. Patricia June Vickers is an artist, teacher, clinical psychotherapist, spiritual director, and an internationally respected leader in the field of trauma research and trauma programming, specifically for Indigenous people. She has a master's degree in educational psychology from the University of Victoria and an interdisciplinary PhD also from the University of Victoria, where her research focused on the transformative aspects of Indigenous ancestral law for resolving personal, family, community, and business conflicts. Her exhibition Healing Journey opened last week here in the Dal Schindell Gallery, and it will be showing until January 24th. Patricia, it's so nice to have you here. And we can clap for all of them at the end. How about that? Next to her is Bradley Clements. He's an independent curator and scholar and a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto, where his research focuses on the treaty responsibilities of museums which hold collections from the Great Lakes region. He has worked with several art and heritage institutions and initiatives. Since 2013, he's worked with survivors of the Alberni Indian Residential School to reclaim and show their childhood artworks in museums and galleries across the country. He's a curator both of Patricia June Vickers' 2019 exhibition, My Soul is Escaped, at Christ Church Cathedral in Victoria, and of Patricia's current exhibition here at Regent College. Bradley, it's wonderful to have you here. And next to him is Mo Hickman. She has a Bachelor's of Theology from Ambrose University and is currently an MATS student here at Regent in the arts concentration. She's preparing for ordination in the Church of the Nazarene, where she's particularly interested in the interfacings and integrations of art and the church. And she works here in the Dal Schindell Gallery, and she's played an absolutely pivotal role in this exhibition coming to fruition. So I'm thrilled to have you here as well. And actually, our plan tonight is to discuss. Patricia specifically wanted the group responsible for pulling this exhibition together to extend and unfold and further the discourse that has started in the exhibition. Okay, so join me in welcoming each of the panelists tonight. Before we get going, I want to ask Patricia to give us a four directions prayer. Start us off. Yeah, I think that should work.
Hello, hello. If you're able, stand, and we'll start by facing east. Holy and Sacred One, as we face the east, we give you thanks for the teacher in every one of us. May we teach the good. May we be open to the good. And then as we turn south, Holy Sacred One, I ask that the healer in every one of us be strengthened, see clearly, and be united with your holy teachings. And now as we face west, it's the way of the visionary. And for those times when we can't see clearly, when we're uncertain, Holy Sacred One, I ask that you would strengthen the faith of the visionary in us. And now as we face north, the way of the warrior, bring us to see and know clearly what it is to be a warrior of peace, of compassion, of love, of wisdom. Amen.
All right, thank you. So the way that we'll proceed tonight is to kind of each spend a little time reflecting on the exhibition, its structure, and our experience of it. So we'll kind of each take a bit of time to do that, and then enter into some conversation with each other, and then open that to conversation with you all as well. So as questions arise, please note them, and there will be time at the end for some questions and answers. And we'll kick off with Bradley, a curator of the exhibition. And I think we're okay on images? Okay. Yeah, beautiful. So I think you can just signal to him as you want them to.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Jonathan, and thank you for opening that way, Patricia. My name is Bradley Clements. Yeah, Jonathan, thank you, Jonathan, for the introduction. I'm a settler of English and Scottish descent, born on Lekwungen territories, currently residing in Dish with One Spoon territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat. It's a privilege to be part of this work. I was introduced to Patricia through friends in the Quaker Friends meeting, and we were introduced for a reason. We didn't know what it was, but these mutual friends of ours were told that there was something we had to talk about. I didn't know what it was. They didn't either, and they said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I do curation. They said, oh, we have a friend who needs a curator. And Patricia said, yep, you'll be the curator. And I come to work in heritage and the arts through the work that Jonathan mentioned of the repatriation of children's artworks from the Alberni Residential School were made there by children and returned to the individuals who created them many, many years later. So that's briefly telling you how I come to sit here today as the person who I am. And I will describe the sections of the exhibition fairly briefly. Patricia will delve later into the deep roots of the traditions that ground each of these sections, because there's far more to be said, and truly going there, I hope that what happens is you can experience it. I think that will do it more justice than what I can say. But Patricia, we did as Jonathan said, we did an exhibition together in 2019, and Patricia said, really, this is about ceremony rather than exhibition. And so what we have here are 4 ceremonies that form this healing journey. We will, oh great, we have the first slide up there. And a friend reminded me of an article by the Cree legal scholar Darcy Lindbergh that I'd read a while ago, talking about, the article is called Beautiful Creeness, and it's about the role of art and ceremony in Indigenous law and how art brings the law into our bodies, how we embody it, even if we don't understand it. And I hope that through this space, moving through this space of the exhibition, that becomes familiar in your body. So the first greeter in the exhibition is Patricia's Tsm'syen, her grandmother. And I didn't realize this as I was curating it, but Patricia mentioned to me tonight the ceremony and protocol of the canoe, and how when we're, particularly in these territories, before setting out on a journey, coming to the same reason for that journey and pulling together in that journey the same motivation for it. And Ho-Chunk Museum scholar Amy Lonetree talks about the importance of understanding the hard truths of colonization before we can truly appreciate everything else, all the beauty that is also in Indigenous cultures today and in the past. But understanding the atrocities allows you to see that beauty. And so the exhibition opens with the historical atrocities, both Patricia's grandmother opens with her personal relationship to this history, having attended the St. Michael's Residential School, but the history that's presented here is far broader geographically and historically than that, unfortunately. The next space, if we can change this slide, thank you, is called Holy Communion, and probably many in this space will be probably more familiar with Holy Communion than I am, to be honest. But this is a space of transformation, accountability, intimacy, vulnerability, and the prayer for all of these things. And curatorially, Patricia was describing this as being an intimate space because it is a very small space. The pieces there are very small. But I reminded her, you know, it faces this open atrium. People can see you from a long way away. And she said, well, exactly, because when you go there, the Creator is watching you. Even if you're in an intimate setting, you're open, you're vulnerable in that powerful way. The next section is titled Remembering. And the ceremony here is it's laid out as the feast hall, the Tsm'syen feast hall, where and this is the setting for justice and governance. And I was at a potluck last weekend, and I was reminded that this is also the place where people bring out their knowledge, they bring out their memories, and they bring out their testimonies. And together, as people come together to do this, what emerges is the truth. People, this collective recollection and collective narrative emerges. So there's the three feast hall tables for each of the clans, and the chief screen of the hosting clan. And something that I was also reminded of, and I was in New Channel territory, so this is not the same as it is up north. So my comments may be off, but there are similarities. But at this potluck, people came up and they recited the history of the house that's recorded on this screen, and the major events and the treasures and the territories of the family that's recorded on this screen. And this screen shows the eagle removing distortion from our small selves, and I think this is really the incredible history of Patricia and her family that she is recorded in this very monumental historical way and in hosting this space. And part of the reason I began by explaining who I am is that all of these are my interpretations, and as a curator and as a museum scholar, there's a history of not positioning who we are, not saying this is my interpretation, but just saying this is how it is. So this isn't how it is. This is how I understand it. And we'll go on to the last section is the supernatural. And Patricia reminds us, I think, that the supernatural is around us throughout, but we might not notice this until we reach this final point where it truly entirely embraces us. And this section is inspired by the ceremony of the sweat lodge, which Patricia's been introduced to and shares with us here. And it's an enclosed space. It's a small space. It has a small entrance, and outside there's the fire where the grandfathers and the grandmother's stones are heated and brought in to share their teachings. And this is so it's a small space, but it's full of power. And the four-direction prayer that Patricia led us through is what forms that fire in this case. And then one final slide. For me, thinking of curation and art, the value is, there's so much value in being in a gallery and seeing art, but to me, the deepest value is not in the gallery, but when you leave the gallery and you see things in a way that you didn't see them before you entered. And in this case, we have this journey, this healing journey that we go through that has this very particular arc. But I mentioned to Patricia at one point, well, with the structure of this gallery, you have to go back to leave. You have to go back through the atrocities to leave. But Patricia said, yes, but you'll see it differently after you've gone through it, that you'll have a different experience of that. So I'll just wrap up by saying that I hope that you have the chance to see the show. I hope that that when you leave, you will see it and the world around you just a little differently. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. On the heels of Bradley moving us through the structure of the show, this four-part movement from atrocities to the supernatural through this remembering. On the heels of that, Patricia's asked Mo and I to walk through the show again, so to speak, and to stop on a few paintings and spend a bit more time with them. So that's what we intend to do. We won't talk about everything, obviously, but pick out a few that I think are really resonant for us and that we want to unfold a little further. Some of this I've started writing down, so I'll kind of slip in between some reading and some discussion. Beginning here with this, the first image that we're confronted with in this show. As one enters this exhibition, one is immediately confronted by the portrait of an adolescent girl, and confronted is probably the right term. She faces us directly, both with her tight arms, folded posture, and her piercing eye contact. This is, as Bradley mentioned, a portrait of Patricia's grandmother, her father's mother. As a child, she was taken to St. Michael's Indian Residential School at Alert Bay here in British Columbia, which was operated by the Anglican Church of Canada. The first residential school in this location was established in 1894, and in 1929, St. Michael's large four-story building was constructed, capable of housing 200 students at a time, making it the largest of the Anglican residential schools. Archival photographs of this building, that four-story building, and of the people who resided in that building, both students and administrators, recur throughout the exhibition, so you can look closely at those. Like the entire residential school system, St. Michael's was not only brutal in its ambition to detach children from their families, their cultures, and their traditions, and to reinculturate them into modern English or colonial culture, and also into Christian belief, but it was also riddled with physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, which is well documented by now. The school was closed on the last day of 1974 and eventually demolished in 2015. Patricia's grandmother carried this, the abuse that she experienced here throughout her life in deep ways, evidently in a somewhat complicated mixture of faith and rage is the word that Patricia used. And Patricia's father would, years later, be forced to attend the same school and suffer similar things. In the image of Patricia's young grandmother, she initially appears to hold a closed book in her folded arms with a dark cover and light pages. At least that's how it initially strikes me. On closer inspection, however, the book is actually a photograph of children writing on a chalkboard at the Red Deer Indian Residential School in Alberta, which is a different residential school, but within the same governmental system. The children are practicing their cursive O's in the photograph, which creates, I think, a very haunting effect, with each student seemingly simultaneously zeroing out their own language and graphically uttering a silent groaning. Oh, it's a haunting photo. The more I look at it, the harder it becomes to look at. And a sign above them admonishes them to be looking unto Jesus. This photograph, clutched closely in this young girl's arms, poignantly, I think, encapsulates the deeply problematic theological crisis and, frankly, probably heresy of the residential schools. This exhibition takes on several issues that are massive in scale. They're social, political, theological scale. And because of that massive scale, they could potentially become very abstract. Yet Patricia offers us her grandmother at the opening, and by extension, her own family history as a concrete, thoroughly human gateway or lens into these large-scale issues. Mo, what else do you do with this image? What else do you see happening in this image?
Yeah, I think it is quite meaningful that we start this journey, this story, with the image of the grandmother. In particular, that it's an image of the grandmother as a child. I think that's an important part to this conversation of trauma and generational healing, and that we aren't, starting here and now. We're starting back then. We're starting with a child, and we're seeing this story through the eyes of a child. I think we are invited into that, to go back in time, to put ourselves in, not the body of a grandmother, but the body of a child going through these experiences. And I think as well, if we can go back to the close-up of the children, you're right, it really is a haunting image. I think with the big sign atop the looking unto Jesus, there is a terrifying irony in that, and these children, they're reaching up to write on the board. There's this sign above, and there's this idea, in a sense, you can see it represented, that they were trying to use Christ to bring the culture out of these children, to take them away from the roots, when really we know Jesus is not up with the high and lofty. Jesus is in the lowly. Jesus is with those who suffer. So, it invites us to look under Jesus. Jesus is not up here. Jesus is down here with these children that are being abused, that are being taken away, that are suffering. And so there is this invitation to us as we see this opening image to both, step into the eyes of this child, this young girl, and to see Jesus with her and with these children.
That's quite nice, the way that flips around, looking unto Jesus is perhaps presented before us. Good. As we turn just to the right of that image, we encounter a series of a second cluster of paintings that I think extends these same topics in really quite powerful ways. Beginning with this Crucifixion, and this is the one that we'll focus on, because it especially sticks with me. In it, we have an all-red Christ on the cross, who is emerging from or surrounded by a ground of the same color, that all-red color. and his head drops down onto his extended right arm, below which we see a photograph of the student body of St. Michael's Residential School. In fact, Patricia's grandmother is one of the children pictured there. And I think this conjunction of photo and crucifixion image is one that's highly charged. In one sense, this Christ figure could be seen as the particular form of Christendom responsible or underwriting the residential school system. It could be read that way. However, I do think another reading suggests itself, one similar to the one that Mo was pursuing. Because even if, sometimes mobilized as an instrument of oppression, even if well-intended, there's no more disruptive image to an oppressive system than that of the crucified Jesus. The victims of this or that oppressive structure always end up looking more like Christ than its enforcers ever do. And this is the kind of inverted logic of some of these, of the residential school system, that the deployment of a kind of coercive power in the name of Christ causes the image of Christ to appear in those who are subjugated, and no amount of greater force can make it otherwise. And the call of the painting is inscribed in the title is "Give us grace." There is this group of people under the right arm of Christ. It does also strike me that the crown of thorns is rendered not in the red tone of everything else, but is rendered in the stark white and black of the photograph. That there is a correspondence there, a correspondence. Mo, do you want to go after this one?
Yeah, I don't think I have too much more to add. I think whenever we look at crucifixion art, you have to pay attention to how Christ is being portrayed and what the message is there. Clearly this is a Christ who is suffering. I think, perhaps is even past the point of death already. This is a Christ who is hurting, who has had life taken away. And so I think, again, we see that empathy with the children in the photo. Christ understands the suffering. Christ understands the loss and the pain. And again, there's no priests, there's no nuns in this photo. There are children being taken under the arm of the suffering Christ.
And the victorious Christ as well. Just to wrap things up here, our contribution and make way for others, I want to look at just a couple, really quickly, make a couple of connections. On this same wall, as you are in the gallery, you'll see this image just to the left that draws from the tradition of Raven as the shapeshifter, the half creature, half divinity that steals light and populates the sky with sun and moon and stars, brings light to creation. And this raven image starts to appear in very evocative ways in this exhibition over and over again as a kind of Christ figure. And these images start talking to each other. The raven here perched upon a Tav-shaped cross that opens toward the right into similar archival photographs. And that is something that Patricia can, I'm sure I'll ask further questions to Patricia about, is Raven as a kind of Christ figure. And that opens up this dialogue between this kind of a representation of Christ and that kind of representation of Christ. And together, the two paintings are prayers: give us grace, bring us light, spoken in different phrases, but also different visual vernaculars. I'll let Mo in on dropping off at one more last painting that makes that identification of Raven and the Christ figure overtly clear. In the last room, once we arrive to the supernatural, there's this astonishing painting called Light of Light that is conspicuously a mother and child composition, with the child represented as Raven, as the bringer of light, or as it's titled here, Light of Light, which those of you who come from some sort of Nicene tradition, that sends off bells immediately. Light of light, God of God, light of light, very God of very God. It is affirmation of the incarnation of God's light. And so we'll get into that discussion further, I imagine. But Mo, do you want to speak to those two groups of paintings?
Yeah, again, we could spend the whole night talking about these things, but we definitely want to hear from Patricia. I think it is, again, meaningful to have these two portrayals of Christ as you enter: the Christ who suffers and the Christ who brings light. And these two prayers that you pray, and you have to keep praying as you go through these stories, but then to come near the end with the light of light, to have the compassionate mother, who is also in that opening set, but we didn't get to talk about, but the mother and the light, and those are the two that are guiding you through these stories. We see the suffering in the beginning, but that's not where we stay. It's the light and the compassion that guides you through the healing journey, and to be greeted by them at the end, and to stand in their presence and to feel their light and their warmth. That's where the hope is for me in this journey. Many questions of what do we do with these stories? How do we move on from this? We have compassion and we have light with us and guiding us as we move through our own stories.
Good. So that's our walking through the exhibition, Mo and I, not speaking for Patricia, but opening one aspect, one reading of the show. I'm quite intrigued to hear from Patricia, though. Would you, yeah, you can use that one. And we're... Yeah, that's good.
And so I can just press
So if
on
you
these.
press forward, yeah, there you go. And go a little further. There you go.
Okay. Oh, magic. What's there is up there. Thank you all for coming tonight, taking time out to be here, and for going through the Four Directions prayer together. That was orienting into this space, and for us to be together in this space. So I want to start by reading this psalm. It was in this morning's reading. Hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee when my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For thou hast been a shelter for me and a strong tower from the enemy. And I thought this was a perfect psalm that for me, speaks about miracles, and that miracles happen. Down or over? So I want to start by talking about the chief screen, and then opposite the chief screen is Tsm'syen the Beautiful, and that's Skidegid on Haida in the 1800s. And it's where my great-grandfather is from, my father's mother's father. So, but he was Haida. And a Yauch is Tsm'syen. It's where my grandmother's from. And my mother was an English woman. She went through missionary training, and she wound up the bishop then, the Anglican bishop, asked her to be the federal day school teacher in Gitga't'la. So she agreed, and by then, the village had already translated the Anglican prayer book into Tsm'syen. They'd already translated many of the hymns into Tsm'syen. So that says a lot about the people of that time, and how they received and accepted the teachings of Christ. And for the people of that time, the Yauch, our ancestral law, and the teachings of Christ were not in conflict. And this comes from Delgum Uch and the Gitsan Wet'suwet'en court case. It's a great introduction to ancestral law. For us, the ownership of territory is a marriage of the chief and the land. Each chief has an ancestor who encountered and acknowledged the life of the land. From such encounters come power. The land, the plants, the animals, and the people all have spirit. They must be shown respect. That is the basis of our law. And I thought about this, and I thought about my mother's teachings. And so God spoke, Creator spoke, and all that we see, the seasons, the movement of the earth, the moon, the sun, all of that is Creator's voice and alive. So this is the first diagram, and it's our interconnectedness. So there are 4 tribes in Gitga't'la. There's the eagle, there's the raven, the killer whale, and the wolf. So this chief screen is the supernatural eagle that represents Creator as the chief. And then the 3 tables are the killer whale, the raven, and the wolf. So you have the 4 tribes of Gitga't'la in the show, in that gallery. You can have many houses in one tribe. So right now, I don't know where it is, but at times the wolves were fairly low. So what happens is adoptions then take place. And then there's process and protocol that we follow. Who does what, when, where, how, and why. So, and here it is laid out in circles, what Delgum Uch said in his address to the crown. The people, chiefs and matriarchs, the Adawach, which are our sacred stories, the land and the supernatural, and then those who are in training. So you're born into the family and training starts right away. The whole house. All your aunties, your uncles, everybody's watching to train you and to teach you. So here it is in a different layout. We have the word Iyauch up on top, ancestral law, and then the wab, or the house, and Pedech is the Tsm'syen word for tribe, and there are the 4. I'm sorry I didn't give you these words. So the first word is Samoyigit, which is chief. The second word is Siganamahana, which is matriarch. Wilsik is prince or princess. The Gagyat is a headman or a nobleman. And Galam al-Yach is the speaker for the chief. And there you see that the house rests on the sacred stories. So Raven, we see Raven bringing light to the world. So amongst Tsm'syens, the word for that, half supernatural, half human, is Tsm'syen. And then if you go up the Skeena River to the Gitsan, the word is Wigyat, same character, same trickster. And those are general stories. That's why Raven's there. So sacred, a Dauch of another house or another tribe, I wouldn't have a right to tell that unless I've asked permission from the chief of that house. And then we see the connection here that Dalgamuch was speaking about, the land where we get our medicine plants. Everything, this still is, it's not in the past. You notice I'm not using past tense at all. And then the spirit world, and Nuch is the word for spirits. Mouse woman, who plays an important role, because she's going to help you when you've been disrespectful, and now you're in the supernatural world and you have to face what you've done. She's there, and she'll help you by giving you the fat from mountain goat. So now we look at in the gallery, that's all before you even go in. And as well, it's there holding everything. So right now we have decolonizing and indigenizing. It's really big. But looking at colonization first, it's a curse. And that a curse is a spiritual act. And then next, if we're looking at logic, next is a curse cannot be reversed. It cannot be reversed. It can only be transformed. So we can't reverse colonization. We cannot decolonize, given this way of looking at it. And when they're speaking of indigenizing, the thing is, I've just told you about Gitcatla, which is one village amongst some Aliach-speaking people in 3 different dialects. So you didn't hear me say I'm indigenous, you heard me say I'm from Gitcatla. Gitcatla people will say, no, we're not Tsm'syen. We're Gitcatla. But I do, Johnson Gordon's gone now. He was a killer whale in my dad's house. But I do say I'm Tsm'syen. So what is reconciliation then? To reconcile, you must have a respectful relationship to begin with, and acts of colonization, acts of dehumanization. We have over 1,900 unmarked graves so far in Canada. Children forced to watch a classmate being disciplined using humiliation and torture. Children crying at night for their parents, who would be imprisoned if they removed their children from the Indian residential school. These facts and so many more, the gross, gross ones that I'm not going to speak about, more that are unthinkable, are actions that are actions from the knowledge of evil rather than the knowledge of good. So if we look at us being two-leggeds, and a long, long time ago, two-leggeds were given the knowledge of good and evil. This is the knowledge of evil. There is a great canyon that separates the actions of Christians. When we look back at Indian residential schools and all that's happened, this is Christians, and the teachings of Christ. There's enormous, enormous disparity between the teachings of Christ and what actually happened. So then I asked and I prayed, so what's the reconciliation then? And it's that those of us who believe in the teachings of Christ, people who call themselves Christians, need to reconcile with God. And what does that mean? I can't say what that means if you believe in the teachings. But it is about a call to action because the suffering is great in our communities. It's just in Eastside, it's in Musqueam. It's across on the North Shore where I'm living on Capilano Res. We've grown up without the words that, so I'm second generation. We've grown up without the words that describe and define the atrocities endured by our grandparents and parents in Indian residential schools. My father never talked about it. My grandmother said it was good. But then how she treated her children, no, it wasn't good. I learned that my father was conditioned to distortion, and the light in him was coupled with hymns and choruses from his village, not to be snuffed out by violence. So my father was diagnosed as a pedophile. I grew up with incest. It was difficult to make sense of that, to find meaning, although I don't really know that I was looking for meaning. I think I was looking more to understand. And not accepting people saying that it was God's will. Never accepting that. So then what? So then they're facts. They're facts, and dehumanization has specific results, and I know them. So in the middle, actually Holy Communion too, is that around reconciliation with God. How do we, given this history, as we kneel to partake in these holy sacraments, how do we bring together the history of our country? It's our country, with these teachings of Christ. What does it mean to be cleansed? That's the question, as I look at those 8 beings. So for me, what happened is I had a whole lot of rage for a long time, and I knew that it was time to get some help. And so I had two colleagues who I'd worked with in the 90s with the Guasala and the Nakwurtak people in Port Hardy. And I said, Steve, I have dissociative amnesia. What can I do? He said, Ulrich and I do lens, which is neurofeedback. And I had never heard of neurofeedback. This was 2017. And so those 30 studies take you through the healing journey. I couldn't write, I couldn't journal. Because initially it was shocking. I knew it was true, and I knew I was in shock. And then I moved out of that, and I knew it was facts, and that I finally made sense to myself. The rage finally made sense. My being triggered when I felt powerless finally made sense. So truth-telling is not easy, for when we make the decision to be truthful, and we must make the decision, then we must let go of our adapted self. You know about attachment theory, yeah? We must let go of our adapted self. That's not easy to do. And the need for validation from others. The need for validation. What we didn't get from our parents. When we needed it. Learning what love and forgiveness means is the territory of the supernatural. We need help, and help will come when we ask. I think one of the big things for me is we moved through the 30 pieces, and then I continued with, after neurofeedback, then I did deep brain reorienting. Why? Because I have 4 children and 10 grandchildren. And I really wanted to do a better job of loving. Because I knew I could. Where did that come from? Well, it came from Creator, you know. I knew I could. So I went after deep brain reorienting. Frank Corrigan developed it, and it's working with the brain and orienting in the brain. So when we're triggered or dysregulated, it's because we're oriented to another time in our life. Certain actions have disoriented us and put us back to another place. So I did deep brain reorienting as a client for 7 months, and then I trained. So, you know, the help is there for those of you that have really known a childhood of trauma. And I just covered this one. I put this study with it because this one really struck me in one of my sessions. I was being raped, and what I saw coming from the crown of my head as a child was, God, help me. That was all that was coming out of the crown of my head. And I thought, wow, the wisdom of a child. I'm so glad that child who was me prayed that prayer. So some people have asked me about the painting process, and Jay, in our interview today, he asked me about you say you pray with a brush. And he asked me to speak a little more to that. And really, I think it came solidly when I couldn't find words, and so I painted those 30. And then I wasn't sure if I was going to continue. And I prayed about that. And then, I don't know if any of you are like this, but I guess I am. I went to Island Blue in Victoria, and they said, you know, oh, why don't you fill this out? You could win these art supplies. And I thought, okay. So I filled it out. Well, they drew the next day, and guess who won the art supplies? Yeah, I did. So, yeah, divine intervention, yes. So I usually see what it is before I start to paint it. And I'm really grateful for that gift, because it is a gift. It's not something I make happen. Although sometimes I sure have to struggle, like we all do with whatever it is we're called to do. So I think that's my last one. Yes.
Good, thank you, Patricia. We are a bit short on time, so I do want to move to the audience, give you all an opportunity to ask some questions, make some comments. So if you want to move down, Professor Greenman will moderate those. I'll start with one, though, just as you all find your way to the microphones. Thank you once again, Patricia, for the show and everything you just said. One of the things that jumped out to me as you were talking there is the statement that we need the supernatural, like this healing journey, whether it's personal or collective, just demands that. And your show culminates there, that it works through these various processes of remembering and then remembering to this encounter with supernatural. Can you say more about how the supernatural end of your show works? How and by extension, how that reflects your larger statement about needing supernatural for reconciliation and healing.
My first thought was, how many eat when you eat your dessert, you save the best part for last before you eat it? And I thought, well, that's a kid. Okay. It's like going into, I've adopted the sweat lodge as my way, thanks to my brother Roy. And so it's like entering into a sacred space, which we can do anywhere, anytime. So as far as the layout goes, it just worked that way. And not that it is last, but on my journey, I didn't really see fully how I was protected and how the way in which it happened when I was going through deep brain reorienting. It was always profound, and I knew that it was also this great mystery. So it's a part of our everyday life, and it's when we really need, that gut need something to move or something to change, that it's there for us. It's always there for us.
Thank you, Patricia. So we have some time for some questions from you folk who are here based on what you have seen and what you have heard. So if you want to ask a question, there are 2 microphones. That's so everybody can hear us and those online can hear us as well. You could feel free to avail yourself of a microphone and ask your question. Seeing as you're right here, go there. That would be good. This is Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark. This is not a fully formed question. I was hoping someone else would come up first. The experience of going through the show is somewhat ceremonial. It feels almost liturgical. I was wondering if you could speak to that a bit, and what the elements of the liturgical nature of the ceremony is. So.
Mark's grandfather was a bishop in Prince Rupert. So when I, heard his last name, I thought, oh, cool. There's a connection to home territory. So I'll say the United Church, the Catholics, and the Anglicans drew straws. And Gitkatla was the straw for the Anglican Church. So when I was a teenager and trying to make sense of my childhood, I found Holy Communion. And the prayers were medicine. I didn't understand fully, but there were certain parts of the prayers that just, it's like somebody gets where I'm at. They really get where I am, and they've written these words for me to say. I am not so worthy as to gather up the crumbs from under thy table, but thou art the same Lord who saw property is always to have mercy. Wow, what a thing to cling to. Because I did some pretty crappy things in my rage.
Thank you very much. Other questions from anyone? Bradley.
I have a question for Patricia, and if you like, I can offer some thoughts, but I'm mainly interested in yours. We've talked a lot about what do we call what we're doing when we're putting this together, because we use the word exhibition, we use the word art. That's my job as a curator, but we always felt that those were just stand-in words. They didn't really make sense. And I'm curious if you've thought further, or I don't know if there's any conclusions, but why those words don't seem right, and what words make more sense to you, or what ideas make more sense to you, if you wouldn't mind reflecting on that.
I think they still don't fit. I stopped using exhibition and started using the word show and showing in the sense of revealing. But I think, Mark, when you use that word ceremony, I would say and when Regent wasn't sure what it was I wanted to do, I said, well, really, to invite you into a way of looking at the history, a welcoming in, which is really different to the anger and the rage. So I think somehow ceremony works, although we don't sell things in ceremony, so it doesn't work completely.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
Hi, my name is Lori, and you said when you were sharing a few moments ago something that seemed quite ironic, maybe, when you said something about that you felt the protection of God with you, and I think it struck me, we don't imagine the protection of God in the midst of atrocity. And I just wonder if you could say a little bit more about that.
What a great question. My understanding of God has changed. When I was younger and my children were young, I'd be asking why. Why this, why that? Whereas now, it's about the unfolding of intergenerational trauma. It's about it unraveling. And I'm a part of that. So, yeah, I'm a part of it, and they're facts. This is what happens. It's law. It's spiritual law.
Thank you very much. Yeah, another question. Thanks.
Hello, my name's Nicola. I've experienced your exhibition a number of times, Patricia, and each time I see something and I experience something more. And this time I saw something that I'm curious about. In the communion section, there's 8 children, and you've numbered them, so I'm assuming there's a progression round. And numbers 7 to 9, their faces are erased. And at least that's how I see it. And I'm not sure if that was your intention. And I wondered if you could talk about that.
Yeah. So first of all, there are 4 and 4, and there are the 4 colors of the 4 directions. The yellow for the east, and then the deep blue for red for the south, deep blue for the west, and then white for the north. And really, as I was painting them, I thought, I don't know if these people are alive, and they most likely have family. And so the reason the faces are painted or because of that. So some of them you can see the features a little easier than others. Yeah. So that's why.
Patricia, the sense that I have after walking through the gallery several times and going through the gallery in our mind's eyes as you've walked us through it today is of the story of Canada, the story of Scripture, the story of the Book of Common Prayer explicitly, which comes up again and again in the work. The image I have of it is this dry and dusty book that's opened up to the Spirit, to the Creator, to the natural world, and to human experiences. I wonder what you'd say to those of us who are students here at Regent, who are tasked with taking that book, and are also tasked, no, it's the wrong word, but feel the weight of trying to make sense of this history, trying to make sense of this space that we now call home, that has these stories and this nature we love so much. But it's quite a task to carry that into our churches and into our spaces of leadership. What would you say to future leaders?
And the task you're speaking of is our shared history of atrocities?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Here's the good thing in ceremony. So I said that Sweat Lodge, I've adopted it. Well, the other thing that goes with Sweat Lodge is a Vision Quest fast. So you go 4 days and nights without liquids or solids. So your body's slowly adjusting to that change. They're important ceremonies. They were for me on my healing journey. They still are. So they're ways that help you when you go through these ceremonies, when you go without food or water for however long you're to do it. You're waiting in stillness and quietness to be shown what it is you're to do. It's been in cultures for thousands of years. And that's what I would say, because it's your personal relationship.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, or? Is there another question? Jonathan, I'll let you make a closing comment and then I'll wrap us up.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask a question, just a quick one. Would you mind saying just a bit more about Raven as a Christ figure?
Yeah, maybe. So one of the things that I say is that Christ is the master shapeshifter. And Raven really represents that. First of all, I know it was through trickery, but stole the light. So first of all, we were living in twilight at the time and we're all gray-skinned. And then Raven brought the light. And that light is important. You know, being able to see. And I don't remember, well, actually there is this one thing I was just gonna say, I don't remember really any kind of humor, but I'm sure he had probably some pretty good humor. But there's this one where a tax collector said, "You haven't paid," and he was with, I don't remember who he's with, and he said, "Well, go to the fish and get it out of his mouth and pay him." And I thought, I think that's trickery. But also, the 40 days, and who fed him? Who fed him when it was over? Wasn't it the ravens, or is that someone else? Elijah?
Elijah.
Thank you.
So Elijah's the raven. No. No. Yeah, good. And I mean, in previous conversations, we started talking about shape-shifting, not just taking different masks or different visages, but being the master of shapes and having the power to rearrange the shapes of lives, the shapes of thinking, the shapes of feeling, a shape shifter as someone who has the power to rearrange shapes, the shapes of life. Yeah.
And I think that this master shapeshifter is just so much bigger than what we know.
And Christ showing up as a raven in your paintings jostles my shapes in a way that's helpful. It doesn't sort of resettle into the raven, but it jostles it enough that it makes possible a glimpsing of the the one who has power over the shapes of life, so to speak. Not to have the last word, but thank you very much to each of you for all of this, the exhibition, this conversation, and the conversations that continue.
Yes, and I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here. And now let's show our appreciation for our panel. A very stimulating evening, which it continues out in the foyer here with refreshments that are there for your enjoyment and further conversation. The exhibition is still on until January 24th. And thank you so much, all of you panelists, for all that you have added to our understanding and challenging us and in allowing us to see with some new eyes. I really appreciate that. And I'd ask all of you to stand, and I'll say a closing prayer as we go. Oh God, you are the creator of all, and you love all that you have made. And we pray that you would continue to watch over and tend our broken world. And Lord God, we thank you that you have come to us in Jesus Christ. We thank you for his mercy and compassion. We thank you for the light that he sheds upon our lives and our world. And together we pray that you would enable us by your grace to live out his ways, his love, his compassion, and his teachings in our circumstances and surroundings, each and every day. For we pray in his name. Amen. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.